Welcome, dear friend. Settle in. Wherever you are, however the day has treated you, let your shoulders soften now, and let your breath grow slow and easy. The world outside can wait. Tonight, we are going somewhere older, somewhere wider, somewhere lit only by starlight and the low amber glow of a campfire that has been patient enough to wait 150 years for you to arrive. Imagine with me, if you will, the great American plains at the very end of a long spring day. The sun has slipped below the horizon, leaving behind a sky the color of old copper and dusty rose. A soft wind moves across the tall grasses, and the grasses whisper back the way grasses have whispered since long before any of us were born. Somewhere far off a coyote calls, just once, and then lets the silence return. A single star has opened its eye in the east. Here, in the lee of a gentle rise, someone has built a small fire. The stones around it are warm. The wood is mesquite and cottonwood, and it crackles with the steady, unhurried rhythm of things that have nowhere else to be. Shadows flicker on a well-worn saddle set beside the flames. A battered coffee pot rests at the edge of the coals, hissing softly. And above it all, the smoke rises, thin and blue, twisting toward the darkening sky like a story still searching for a listener. Tonight, that story is about a man. His name was Bass Reeves. And if you've never heard of him, do not be sorry. For a very long time, the world chose not to tell his story out loud. And if you've heard of him, you will know already that the truth of his life is stranger, braver, and more wondrous than any dime novel ever dared to imagine. Hollywood sheriffs in white hats, fast-draw gunfighters, masked riders on pale horses. Many of the legends you think you know about the American frontier were, in their quiet and unacknowledged way, reflections of him. A shadow cast long across a century. Bass Reeves stood over 6 feet tall. He had broad shoulders, a steady voice, and a pair of dark, thoughtful eyes that were said to miss very little. He wore a wide-brimmed black hat, polished boots, and when the dust of the road grew too much for even him, a fine, carefully kept suit that surprised every outlaw who expected someone rough. He rode a great horse, sometimes a red one, sometimes a gray, and he carried 2 pistols, reversed in their holsters for a practice cross-draw. He could shoot the heads off turkeys at distances that grown men argued about for years afterward. He could speak the languages of several native nations. He could slip into a disguise so complete that criminals sat beside him at campfires just like this one, sharing their coffee, never guessing that the kind stranger with the gentle voice was the very lawman hunting them. In his long career, he is said to have arrested more than 3,000 fugitives. 3,000. Think of that number for a moment. Let it drift past you like the smoke of our little fire. 3,000 men and women brought to justice by a single rider, across a country so wild and so wide that most people of his time never dared cross it at all. And here is the part that makes the legend almost impossible to believe, and yet entirely true. Bass Reeves was born a slave. He was born into bondage in the American South, in a time when the law itself insisted he was not a person, but a piece of property. He was not taught to read. He was not permitted to own a name that was fully his own. And yet he would go on to wear a federal badge and carry the full weight of the United States government into the most dangerous territory in North America, and do so with a fairness, a courage, and a quiet dignity that outshone nearly every man who rode beside him. How does such a life happen? How does a boy born in chains become a legend of the open plains? That is the story the fire has been waiting to tell. So lean back now. Let your eyes grow heavy if they wish. The night is long, and we have many miles to travel together, from the cotton fields of the South, through the deep woods of Indian Territory, across rivers and valleys, and the long, lonesome trails that only memory knows. The fire is warm. The coffee is strong. And the story is just beginning. So let us travel back now, gentle listener, away from the hearth and out through the years, like smoke curling softly up a chimney and into the open sky. Let the decades fall away one by one, each a soft page turning in an old leather book. 1838. A year before the photograph was common. A year when the steam engine was still a marvel, and the great rivers of America carried flatboats piled with cotton, with salt pork, with dreams both hopeful and harsh. We find ourselves in Arkansas. The land here is lush and layered, a quilt of red clay and river bottom, of pine stands that sigh in the wind and oak groves that hold the heat of summer long after the sun has gone down. Cicadas hum in the tall grass. Somewhere, a mockingbird practices its many voices. And in a small wooden cabin on the farm of a man named William Reeves, a child is born. They name him Bass. Just that. One soft, simple syllable, like a single note plucked on a fiddle string. Bass Reeves, taking the surname of the man who claims to own him, as was the cruel custom of the time. He comes into the world in a cabin with a dirt floor, with walls chinked by his mother's own patient hands, with a single window that lets in the pale gold light of an Arkansas dawn. He comes into the world small and warm and perfect, and his mother holds him close, and for a moment the whole wide trouble of the age falls away. His mother, oh, let us linger here a moment, by the bedside of this young woman whose name is Perlily. Perlily, a name that sounds like a song itself, like something whispered at twilight. She hums to her infant son as the coals glow low in the little hearth. She hums the old melodies, the ones her own mother taught her. Songs carried across oceans and generations, softened by sorrow and sweetened by love. The lullabies drift up to the rough-hewn rafters, out through the cracks in the shutters, and into the quiet Arkansas night. And so the seasons turn, as seasons always do. The baby becomes a boy. The boy learns the shape of his small world. He learns the rhythms of the farm before he learns his letters. He learns that the rooster crows just before the stars begin to fade, that the cool dew of morning beads on the tops of his bare feet as he carries buckets to the well. He learns the weight of a water pail and the weight of a chore list, and he learns, too, the great weight that hangs in the air of a place where some people are free and others are not. But a child does not yet know all the names for such weights. A child only knows the feel of his mother's hand on his cheek, the warmth of biscuit dough rising in a tin pan, the pleasant ache in his legs after a day of running errands between cabin and field and barn. In the cotton rows, he watches the men and women bend to their labor. He sees their hands, swift, strong, scarred, move down the long green aisles. He watches how they sing. How they sing, even when they are tired, even when the sun is merciless, even when their backs cry out for rest. He watches his mother's hands, too, when she needs bread at the end of a long day, her knuckles white with flour, her eyes soft with a tiredness that seems older than she is. And yet, in all of this, there is laughter. There is joy. There are small moments that stitch themselves, like bright threads, into the fabric of a childhood. A piece of molasses candy slipped into his palm by an old aunt with a knowing smile. A story told by lamplight about a clever rabbit who outwitted a hungry fox. A game of marbles played in the dust of the dooryard, the glass spheres catching the sun like fallen stars. And through it all, quietly, patiently, something is taking shape in the boy. A kind of steadiness, a kind of knowing. He is watching. He is learning. He is gathering, without yet understanding, the tools of the man he will become, the sharp eye, the long memory, the quiet courage that does not shout but waits. The boy Bass Reeves, barefoot in the Arkansas dust, is already, in some small and sacred way, becoming the lawman of the distant West. But that is still far, far ahead. For now, the evening comes on. His mother calls him in. And the stars, one by one, come out to keep their gentle watch. The years turn as years do, quietly, without announcement, the way a river bends without ever asking permission of its banks. Bass grows taller. His shoulders broaden. His hands, once small enough to cup a single plum, learn the weight of reins and the patience of waiting. And then, one morning that feels like any other morning but is not, the word comes down from the big house. The family is moving, packing up their lives and pointing them west, toward Texas, toward a place called Grayson County, where the land is said to stretch out flat and generous beneath a sky that goes on forever. There is a great gathering of things. Trunks are dragged from attics. Quilts are folded with the care of prayers. The iron skillets, blackened by 1,000 suppers, are wrapped in burlap and laid gently in the wagons. And Bass, still young, still quiet, is told he will be coming along. Not as a son of the soil he was born to, no. He will travel as the personal servant to his master's son, a young man not much older than himself, a boy who has known Bass as long as Bass has known mornings. The wagons roll out at dawn. The wheels turn slow, and the oxen lean into their yokes with that ancient, uncomplaining patience that belongs to creatures who have never once imagined another life. Bass walks beside them for the first mile, then climbs up onto the buckboard, and from there he watches the only world he has ever known fall away behind him, piece by gentle piece. The familiar trees. The creek where he learned to kneel and drink. The cabin doorway where his mother still stands, one hand raised, growing smaller and smaller until she is only a suggestion, only a memory the wind is carrying off. The road west is long, longer than a boy can hold in his mind all at once. It unspools day by day, mile by mile, through country that keeps changing its mind about what it wants to be. There are pine woods dark and cool as cellars. There are meadows where deer lift their heads and watch the wagons pass with eyes like polished stones. There are rivers to ford, slow and brown, where the water rises to the axles and the oxen bellow their complaints, and Bass slides down to lead them across, his bare feet finding the smooth pebbles of the riverbed. At night, the wagons draw into a circle, the way tired things will always draw toward one another for warmth. A fire is built. Coffee is boiled. The smell of wood smoke mingles with the sweet dust of the road, and somewhere off in the dark a whippoorwill calls, over and over, as though it has been given only that one note to say, and must make it last the whole night through. Bass lies on a blanket beneath a wagon, and he looks up, and there is Texas already beginning to show him her stars. Such stars. More than he has names for. Scattered like grain across a field no hand could ever reap. He is young, and he is a servant, and he knows exactly what the world has told him he is. But lying there, with the prairie wind moving through the tall grass like a great slow hand, something inside him does not quite believe it. Something inside him is listening past the whippoorwill, past the soft snoring of the men, past the creak of the wagons settling into their stillness. Something inside him is listening for a door. He does not know yet where the door is, or when he will find it, or what will lie on the other side. But he knows, with the quiet certainty of a seed buried deep, that a door exists, and that he will walk through it one day, on his own feet, under his own sky. The young master stirs in his bedroll, calls softly for water. Bass rises and brings it, the tin cup catching a thin slice of moonlight as he passes it over. The boy drinks and murmurs thanks and falls back into sleep, and Bass stands a moment longer in the hush of the camp, looking out across the dark sea of grass. A coyote sings somewhere far away, and another answers, and the two voices weave together and fade. He returns to his blanket. He folds his hands beneath his head. And as the fire burns low and the stars wheel slowly in their ancient patience, Bass Reeves closes his eyes and lets the long road carry him, one steady breath at a time, deeper into the country that will one day know his name. The night deepens around him, and the country itself seems to lean in close, as though listening. Somewhere far off, an owl calls once, and then the stillness returns, soft as a folded quilt. And while he sleeps, the years slip quietly backward, like pages turning in a book left open by the hearth, until we find him once again a younger man, standing at the edge of a trouble he cannot walk around. The war has come to the country. Far away, armies move across fields and rivers, but here, in the house where Bass is held as property, the war arrives as rumor, as whisper, as the low tremor of change moving beneath the floorboards. His enslaver has ridden off to fight, and Bass has been taken along as a body servant, carrying water, tending horses, sleeping on the cold ground beside a cause that was never his own. And then, one quiet evening, a quarrel flares up between them. The details are lost to time, tucked away where only the wind remembers. Perhaps it was a card game gone sour. Perhaps a word spoken too sharply. Whatever the spark, the fire caught, and Bass, strong and tall and no longer willing to bend, struck his enslaver and fled into the dark. Imagine the running, the pounding of boots on soft earth, the breath burning sweet in the chest, the stars above, cold and clean, pointing the way west. He runs until the running becomes walking, and the walking becomes a slow, steady rhythm through country he has only heard of in stories. Indian Territory, a great wild reach of land just beyond the border, where the laws that held him have no reach, and where the slave catchers who hunt him will find the going very hard indeed. He moves by night and rests by day, drinking from creeks that run cold and clear over smooth stones. He sleeps in thickets of cane and cottonwood, wrapped in nothing but the dark. The land itself begins to teach him. The way a deer trail curves gently around a swale. The way moss gathers on the north side of a trunk. The soft, damp hush of bottomland forests, where sycamores lift their pale arms and the river's wind like thoughts finding their own way home. And then, one morning, hungry and quiet and worn down to the grain, he is found. Or perhaps he allows himself to be found. A Seminole hunter, or a Creek farmer, or a Cherokee rider sees him at the edge of the trees, and instead of turning him back, offers him a place by the fire. A bowl of stew, a blanket, a question asked gently, and an answer received without judgment. So begins the long schooling of Bass Reeves. The Cherokee teach him their language, the lovely flowing syllables that rise and fall like water over stone. The Creeks show him their songs and their stories, the old names for the hills and the rivers, the seasons and the stars. The Seminole, stubborn and kind, teach him how to track a horse across dry ground, how to read the bent grass, how to tell a cold trail from a warm one by the feel of the air alone. He learns to speak with his hands when words fall short. He learns which berries are safe and which will turn a belly to thunder. He learns to move silently through timber, to fish with patience, to find sweet water in dry country. He learns that the world is larger than the farm he grew up on, larger than any master's map, and that freedom is not merely the absence of chains, but the presence of skill and friendship and the long, slow building of a life. Years drift by, soft as smoke. The war rumbles on somewhere beyond the horizon. And then, at last, it ends. Word travels through the territory like a slow sunrise. The chains are broken. The country is changed. Bass Reeves is, by the law that once owned him, a free man. But he does not forget the hidden creeks that hid him. He does not forget the quiet fires where strangers became family, or the old songs sung beneath wide, starry skies. He carries it all with him, folded carefully inside his chest, the way a man carries letters he cannot bear to part with. And so, when he finally turns his horse homeward, back across the border into Arkansas, he is no longer only the man who fled. He is something new, something forged in the long wooded silences of the territory, tempered by kindness and hunger, and the steady, patient teaching of three great nations. He is ready, though he does not yet know for what, to be summoned. The summoning, when it comes, does not come with trumpets. It comes with the soft opening of a door and the smell of coffee on a cool Arkansas morning. The war is over. Somewhere far away, in rooms Bass has never seen, men have signed papers that change the meaning of his life. The word is passed along the creek beds and the back roads the way all important words travel in that country, slowly, carefully, handed from porch to porch like a candle shielded against the wind. Free. He turns the word over in his mouth. It tastes, at first, like disbelief. Then, slowly, like warm bread. He makes his way to the low, wooded country near Van Buren, Arkansas, where the Arkansas River bends in great lazy loops between banks stitched with willow and sycamore. The land here is not grand. It is modest, honest land, the color of strong tea, threaded with small streams that chuckle to themselves in the summer and freeze into silver ribbons in the winter. It is the sort of land that does not make promises. It only offers its quiet patience and waits to see what a man will do with it. Bass chooses a rise above a creek. He builds a cabin there, log by careful log, the notches fitted snugly at each corner, the chinking padded in with clay from the bank. The roof is shingled from oak he splits himself, each shingle laid like a scale, so the rain slides off with a small, companionable hiss. Inside, there is a hearth. There is a window with real glass. There is a door he can close and open and close again, simply because he wishes to, simply because the hinges are his. Her name is Nellie Jenny. She comes into his life the way certain songs come into the evening, softly, and then you cannot imagine the quiet without her. She is kind-eyed and quick-handed, and she laughs with her whole chest when something strikes her truly funny. They are married in the plain, reverent way of country people, under a sky that seems in no particular hurry. That night, the whip-poor-wills call from the hollows, and Bass lies awake listening to her breathing beside him and thinks, with a slow and astonished gratitude, so this is what is meant by home. The children come in their own time, like crops. A boy first, then a girl, then another, and another, until the cabin is full of small warm voices and small warm feet. Bass carves them spoons from cedar. He whittles them little whistles that make the dogs tilt their heads in polite confusion. In the mornings, he lifts the smallest onto the broad shelf of his shoulder, and she grips his ear the way a sailor grips a railing, and the two of them walk out into the dew-wet yard to see what the world has made overnight. There is a rhythm to these years, and it is the oldest rhythm there is. In spring, he follows the mule down long chocolate furrows, the plow singing its low iron song as it turns the earth. In summer, the corn rises around him, tall and green and whispering, and he walks between the rows with his hand out, brushing the leaves like a man greeting old friends. In autumn, the apples ripen, and the smokehouse fills, and the children's cheeks shine with the grease of good eating. In winter, he sits by the fire, mending harness, while Nellie Jenny hums something without words, and the kettle on the crane murmurs its endless, reassuring sentence. He rises before the sun. He eats what he has grown. He sleeps when he is tired, and not 1 minute before nor after. These are small freedoms, the kind a man who has never been owned can scarcely understand. But to Bass, each of them is a small, bright coin, and he counts them often, and he is never once bored of the counting. On Sunday evenings, neighbors drift over. There is fiddle music sometimes, and coffee that has been boiled to the strength of friendship, and low, slow talk about weather and crops and the doings of the county. Bass listens more than he speaks. He has learned, in his long wandering, the deep value of listening. He notices which men raise their voices to hide something, and which men go quiet when the truth is near. He tucks these noticings away, without meaning to, the way a squirrel tucks acorns into the secret folds of an oak. And the years pass, and the farm prospers in its modest, patient way. And Bass Reeves, homesteader, husband, father, seems for all the world to be exactly what he appears to be, a settled man, content beneath his own roof, asking nothing more of life than the turning of the seasons. But far to the west, across the Arkansas River, the Indian Territory is stirring, and it is beginning very softly to call his name. The year turns to 1875, and the spring rains come soft across Arkansas, swelling the rivers and greening the low hills. In the little town of Van Buren, smoke rises straight from the chimney of the Reeves home, and Jenny hums a hymn at the washboard, and the children's laughter drifts out across the yard like the song of small, bright birds. Bass is in the field behind the house, his shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow, walking slow behind the plow as the earth turns dark and fragrant beneath the blade. It is the kind of morning that feels as though it might last forever. It is the kind of morning that never quite does. Across the river, in the rough young city of Fort Smith, a new judge has arrived. His name is Isaac Charles Parker, and he is not yet 40 years old. A tall, grave man with a long beard and steady eyes and a voice that, when he means it to, can fill a courtroom the way a church bell fills a valley. He has come from Missouri, come at the request of President Grant himself, come to preside over a district that has become, by every honest reckoning, the most troubled patch of ground in the whole of the American Republic, the Western District of Arkansas, and, stretching westward from the courthouse steps for 75,000 square miles, the vast and unruly expanse of the Indian Territory. It is a country without counties, a country without sheriffs, a country where the white man's law ends at the river's edge and does not begin again until the far horizon of Texas. Outlaws have learned this. Horse thieves and whiskey peddlers and murderers on the run have learned this. They cross the Arkansas and they vanish into the blackjack thickets and the cane brakes and the long river bottoms, and they are, for all practical purposes, gone. The peaceful tribes who make their homes there, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Cherokee, the Creek, the Seminole, have no power to arrest a white fugitive. Only the United States deputy marshals can ride in after them. And the deputy marshals in the year 1875 are far too few, and the ones who do ride in, too often, do not ride out. Judge Parker listens to all of this on his first day in chambers, and he nods slowly, and he sets his hand upon the desk. And he says in that quiet voice of his that he will need 200 deputies, 200 men with the courage to cross the river, 200 men who will not flinch. The task of finding them falls to his marshal, a seasoned Irish-born lawman named James F. Fagan, and Marshal Fagan, sitting alone at his desk one long evening, running a finger down a list of possible names, finds his thoughts drifting back through the years, back to the stories he has heard told around campfires and around barroom stoves. Stories about a certain Freedman who lives quietly over in Van Buren. A man who speaks Creek and Seminole and Cherokee as fluently as he speaks English. A man who, during the late war, is said to have hidden in the territory for so long that he came to know every creek and every crossing, every stand of oak and every bend of stone, the way a farmer knows the rooms of his own house. A man, folks say, who can shoot the head off a turkey at 100 yards with either hand, and who has never, in all his days, been known to tell a lie. Marshal Fagan lays down his pen, and he reaches for a fresh sheet of paper. And he writes, in a careful and deliberate hand, a summons to one Bass Reeves of Crawford County, Arkansas, requesting his presence at the federal courthouse in Fort Smith at his earliest convenience. The letter travels by post rider through the warm green countryside. It comes up the lane past the dogwoods in bloom. It arrives at the Reeves farmhouse on a quiet afternoon, and Jenny takes it in from the courier's hand, and she turns it over once, and she carries it out to her husband where he is watering the mule beside the barn. Bass wipes his hands on his trousers. He takes the letter gently. He breaks the seal, and there, in the slanting light of that ordinary afternoon, he reads the words that will change everything. The words that will lift him up out of the quiet rhythms of the farm and set him at last upon the long road that has been waiting for him all along. And so the road unfurls, not all at once, but slowly, the way morning unfurls across a sleeping prairie, inch by golden inch. Bass Reeves rides out from the quiet of his farm and into the wide, waiting country, a badge pinned close to his heart and a pair of long Colt revolvers at his hips. Behind him rolls the chuck wagon, creaking softly on its tall wooden wheels, its canvas glowing pale as candlelight against the dawn. Behind that ride the posse men and the cook and the Indian trackers who know the land the way a mother knows her child's sleeping breath. And ahead of them all stretches Indian territory, 75,000 square miles of rolling grass, deep timber, hidden rivers, and long, slow silences. It is a country so vast that a man could ride for a week and never see another soul. A country of tall blue-stem grass that bends and waves when the wind walks through it, of blackjack oaks gathered in quiet groves, of red earth and silver creeks, and skies so broad they seem to hold the whole of heaven in their arms. Bass rides through it the way a good shepherd moves through a meadow, unhurried, watchful, listening. His big hat shades his eyes. His horse steps soft. There is no need to rush. The outlaws out there have time, and so does he. More, perhaps. He has a patience older than hurry. In the mornings, he wakes before the light. He is already up when the first gray breath of dawn appears along the eastern rim of the prairie, already tightening the cinch of his saddle, already watching the horizon turn from iron to rose to honey gold. The cook stirs the fire. The cook begins its low, contented murmur. The scent of biscuits and bacon drifts out across the dew-bright grass, and somewhere far off a meadowlark calls its clear, clean whistle into the hush. Bass stands by his horse, one gloved hand resting easy on its shoulder, and he simply looks. He looks long. He looks the way a man looks who has learned, through all the quiet years, that the world will tell you what it knows if only you give it the courtesy of your attention. By mid-morning they are moving again, a slow, dark line across a sea of grass. The wagon sways. The harness jingles softly. Bass rides out ahead, sometimes alone, sometimes with a tracker at his side, reading the ground the way a scholar reads an old beloved book. Here, the mark of a shod hoof pressed into damp clay. Here, a broken stem of sunflower where something tall had passed. Here, the faint gray ash of a fire 3 nights cold. He gathers these small truths the way a farmer gathers eggs, carefully, without fuss, letting nothing go to waste. When they come to a river, the Canadian, the red, the wide, slow Arkansas, he lets the horses drink. The water runs over the pebbles with a sound like whispered lullabies. Cottonwoods lean above the banks, their leaves rustling in a language older than any written law. The men wade their mounts across one by one, and Bass watches each one safe to the far shore before he follows, the way a father counts his children home at dusk. Evenings are the gentlest hours of all. The wagon halts in some sheltered cup of land where a spring runs cold and sweet. The fire is built low and careful. Blankets are spread. The horses are hobbled and left to graze, their soft tearing of the grass a sound as restful as rain on a roof. And Bass, after supper, sits cross-legged near the lantern with a folded stack of warrants in his broad hands. He cannot read the words, not yet, not the letters themselves, but he has asked and listened and remembered, and he knows each one by heart. A man's name, a man's face, a man's crime. He turns each warrant in the yellow lantern light as if it were a leaf pressed between the pages of a hymnal, weighing it, feeling its edges, committing it once more to memory. He does not hurry toward the men whose names he carries. He does not hunger for the fight. Bass Reeves has learned from a lifetime of quiet that cunning is kinder than force, that patience outlasts fury, and that the gentlest hand is often the one that holds the surest truth. So he rides, and he listens, and he waits. And above him the great slow stars wheel on, as they have always done, over the long and sleeping prairie. And so it is in the long hush of those prairie years that a quiet legend begins to take shape around him, the way frost takes shape on a window pane, slowly and without fuss, and almost without anyone noticing at first. They begin to call him, in the hush of cabins and the low murmur of trading posts, a master of disguise. It is a grand title, and he wears it lightly, the way he wears his long coat, as if it were simply another thing that kept the weather off. For Bass Reeves has discovered, somewhere along the patient road of his work, that the surest way to catch a frightened man is not to come for him at all. It is to arrive beside him, quite by accident, as a neighbor might arrive, with tired eyes and road dust on his sleeves, and a small, easy story about nowhere in particular. So he becomes, by turns, a great many gentle strangers. On one morning, he is a wandering cowhand, stooped a little in the saddle, his hat pulled low and soft against the sun. On another, he is a farmer come down from the hills to trade, his boots caked with honest mud, a bundle of seeds tucked carefully in his coat. Once, they say, he arrives at an outlaw's door as a plain, slow tramp, his clothes in careful tatters, one sole of his boot flapping loose like the tongue of a sleepy dog, and he asks, in the softest voice, only for a little water and perhaps a corner of the porch to rest. And the men inside, who have slept with pistols near their pillows for a year, and who would have shot a marshal on sight, look at this poor, weary wanderer and feel, for the first time in a long while, something like pity. They bring him bread. They bring him coffee. They ask him to sit. And when at last he rises, and the old coat falls open, and the badge catches a slow gleam of afternoon light, there is only a long, astonished stillness, and then the quiet click of handcuffs, as gentle as a latch closing at the end of the day. He brings them in this way, one after another, like a patient fisherman drawing in a long and quiet net. and the number grows in ones and twos and tens and fifties, through the turning of seasons, through the thaw of springs and the hush of winters, until at last, when the tally of all his years is written down, it will come to something near 3,000 souls brought home to the courthouse at Fort Smith. 3,000. A whole town of wanderers walked gently back into the circle of the law. And of all those thousands, only the smallest handful will ever feel the bite of his gun, for he has learned, deep in the root of himself, that a drawn weapon is a last sorrow, and not a first greeting. Still, when the need comes, his hand is steady as a held breath. His aim is the kind the old frontiersmen speak of in slow, wondering tones by the fire. They say he can split a stone at 100 paces. They say he can lay down a coin on a stump and make it spin from across a clearing. They say a wild turkey, high in the autumn brush, need only lift its head once, and the quiet matter is settled. But he takes no pride in this. He speaks of shooting the way a carpenter speaks of his hammer, as a tool he would rather not use, as a thing best kept oiled and wrapped and sleeping in its drawer. And so the tales travel. They pass from porch to porch on summer evenings. They drift through the smoke of little kitchens. They ride on the backs of cattle drovers into towns he has never seen. Children hear of him at bedtime and grow drowsy-eyed, imagining a tall, kind shadow in a long coat who knocks softly on doors no one else will knock on. Old men nod over their coffee and remember the day a ragged tramp turned out to be the law itself, polite as a Sunday. Through all of it, Bass Reeves rides on, unhurried, as he has always ridden. His horse knows the way. The prairie keeps its long, soft breath. And somewhere, far out in the evening grass, another small fire is being kindled by a man who thinks himself safely hidden, a man who does not yet know that a quiet stranger is coming down the road, asking only for a little water and a place to rest his tired boots. But there is another road, one that Bass must walk only once in his long life, and it is the hardest road of all. Of all the miles he rode, of all the rivers he crossed in the soft blue hour before dawn, there is one journey the old lawman whispered about for years afterward, always with a lowered voice, always with a gentle shake of the head. It was the day Bass Reeves rode out, with a warrant folded in the pocket over his heart, and the name written on that warrant was the name of his own son. Imagine the morning, a still morning, the sort where the grass seems to hold its breath, where the light lies flat across the fields like a quilt smoothed by a careful hand. Word had come, as word always came, through the slow channels of the frontier. A telegraph tapping in a wooden office, a rider from a neighboring county, a murmur passing from porch to porch. There had been a killing. A young man was wanted, and the young man was Benny Reeves. They say Bass did not speak when the warrant was placed on his desk. They say the other deputies looked at the floor, at the walls, at anything but his face. There was a long quiet. The kind of quiet that gathers in a room the way snow gathers in a field, soft and heavy and slow. He could have asked another man to ride. No one would have begrudged him that. A father's heart is not a thing the law was ever meant to measure. But Bass had carried the badge for too many years to lay it down now, and he believed, in the deep quiet places of his spirit, that a law which bent for one man would soon break for all. If the badge meant anything, it meant this. If justice meant anything, it meant even this. So he saddled his horse in the gray, tender hour before sunrise. He tightened the cinch with hands that had done the same small work 10,000 times, and the leather creaked softly the way old leather does, like a sigh you keep to yourself. He rode out alone. The prairie opened before him, the way it always had, patient and wide, and the wind moved through the grasses in long, slow waves, the way water moves far out at sea. He rode for days. The grass brushed the flanks of his horse. The clouds drifted overhead, white and slow, casting their shadows across the hills like hands passing gently over a sleeping child. At night he made his small fire, as he had made so many, and sat quietly while the coyotes called to one another across the dark. He prayed, they say. He prayed the long, wordless prayer of a man who loves deeply and must still do what is right. And when he found his boy, he did not raise his voice. He did not raise his hand. He simply spoke his son's name, softly, the way he had spoken it when the boy was small, the way he had spoken it over a cradle once, over a supper table, over a lamplit porch at the end of a summer day. Then he came willingly. There was no running. There was no fight. There was only a father and a son, and a quiet that stretched between them like a long country road. Bass rode beside him all the way back. He did not put him in chains for the journey, some say, though the story changes a little from teller to teller, the way all true stories do. What does not change is the gentleness of it. What does not change is the sorrow. A man carrying his own heart in handcuffs, and not once turning his face from the duty of it. And when the trial had passed and the sentence was given, Bass did what men of his quiet kind have always done. He went home. He tended his horse. He cleaned his rifle. He sat on the porch in the long, soft evening and watched the swallows cut their small curves across the sky, and he said very little, because some griefs are too deep for words and must simply be borne, the way the prairie bears the weight of the stars, night after night after night, without complaint, without end. The badge over his heart still shone, and somewhere inside it, folded small, was the love of a father, still there, still burning, steady as a lamp in a farmhouse window, waiting for the long road home. The last years came softly, the way dusk comes to a wide country, without hurry, without announcement, only the gradual lowering of the light until the world is colored in amber and hush. Bass took a post with the Muskogee police, walking the streets of a town that had grown up around him while he wasn't looking, a town of lamp posts and wooden sidewalks and small shops with their bells above the doors, and the people there knew him, and tipped their hats and stepped aside, not from fear anymore, but from something gentler, the old instinctive reverence a village keeps for its oldest tree. He was in his 70s now, and the years had laid their patient hands upon him. His shoulders had rounded a little, the way a river stone is rounded by long, tender water. His hair had gone the color of winter grass, and yet when he walked his slow rounds in the evening, past the livery and the general store, and the small, bright windows of the houses where families were sitting down to supper, there was still in his step the old, even rhythm of a man who had walked 10,000 miles and knew how to walk 10,000 more. He didn't carry his guns the way he used to. He didn't need to. The frontier was folding itself up like a great quilt being put away for the season, and a new century had come in on quiet feet, and the stories were already beginning. The stories that would outlive him, and outlive his children's children, and go on being told around other fires and other times by people who had never seen his face. They would say later that he had arrested 3,000 outlaws. They would say he had never once been wounded, though the bullets had come for him like rain. They would say that somewhere in the tall tales and the dime novels and the whispered yarns of the old trail towns, a figure had formed, a masked rider on a pale horse, just and fearless and unknowable, and that the figure was him, Bass, the seed of a legend he would never hear, because legends bloom slowly, and their fragrance rises long after the flower has closed. In the winter of 1910, he took to his bed. His kidneys were failing, and he knew it the way old lawmen know things, without being told. His family gathered close. The room was warm. Someone had brought coffee, and the scent of it mixed with the scent of wood smoke and clean linen, and the low, lovely murmur of voices loving him quietly in the next room. He closed his eyes. The snow fell outside, soft as a mother's hand. And in the gentle dark behind his eyelids, he was on horseback again, riding the long ridge at dawn, and the prairie lay open before him, golden and endless, and a boy's voice somewhere was laughing, and a father was laughing back, and the badge over his heart shone, like a single quiet star. And so we come, my friends, back to the fire where we began. The embers are low now. The coffee has gone cool in the pot. The night has wrapped its blue shawl around the hills, and the first owl is calling, somewhere off in the soft black timber, and the wind is moving gently in the pines, the way it has always moved since long before any of us were here, and long after we are gone. Bass Reeves is sleeping now, in the old cemetery at Muskogee, under the slow turning of the stars. The badge is put away. The horse is unsaddled. The long, patient road is folded up and laid aside, the way a traveler folds his coat at the end of the day. But the story is still writing. It rides in the telling. It rides in the remembering. It rides in every small, brave act of a person who was born with nothing and chose, day after day, to stand up straight and do what is right. He was born enslaved, and he died free, and between those two words he carved a life so full of courage and kindness that the prairie itself seems even now to lean in and listen when his name is spoken aloud. So rest easy, traveler. The fire is dying down. Pull the blanket up around you. Let the night come. Somewhere, out on the dark and gentle land, a lone rider is turning his horse toward home. His badge catches the moonlight. His shadow is long, and the road ahead of him is quiet and kind and good. Good night, Bass Reeves. Good night,